It's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. Here we monitor the matrix of all that's ever happened or ever will across the Whoniverse, on and off screen. And I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, designated driver of your free-speaking, big-thinking show. All those incarnations of the Time Lord over 6 decades now. Whenever, wherever and however you started your journey with whichever Doctor, you'll get something out of each and every trip with Type 40. Back aboard the TARDIS on a summer's night. Nothing on the telly, but then again, there hasn't been for a while. Nothing Doctor Who related. For even longer, happily for me, I have some conversations to be had and good people to hold them with. And joining me for a night in front of the box, it's Charlotte Shields.
Hello, everybody. I know it has been a bit quiet, but actually it's made me sort of watch other stuff and sort of explore other things, which has been nice. I've been watching House of the Dragon, and I went to see Spider-Man, and I really enjoyed that. So I've sort of had a bit of time away from Who at the moment, but I'm always ready to come back to chat with you.
Other things, call yourself a Doctor Who fan. Well, you sort of have to have time away from Doctor Who for the time being, because Doctor Who is having time away from us. I mean, no matter how many times I sort of bang this thing on the top or the sides or even underneath, I've tinkered wherever I can, short of taking the thing apart, and I still can't pick up any Doctor Who. And I'm happy to say that we have another willing participant in the madness this time, in the form of our mate Mike Belgrave.
Hey, good to be here. Good to be here. Yes, yeah. Like Charlotte, I've been going elsewhere every now and then. I've been actually. You know what? I've finally caught up on Young Sheldon, which has a lovely Doctor Who bit in it actually, where he dresses up as Sylvester McCoy, and for the year they get it just perfect. You know, they think that it was that year Sylvester McCoy would have been the actual Doctor, and that was great. And then I've also been watching Stuart Fails to Save the Universe.
I'm gonna say same people, isn't it?
Yeah, same people. And I have to say, it is brilliant. It is absolutely just tremendous. If you're a Doctor Who fan, I think you'll absolutely love it.
I think we'll have to look at that. I hear constantly good things about Young Sheldon, Charlotte. I loved Big Bang Theory when it was on, but it's one of those that ran for a few years, a little bit too long. I thought, well, it wouldn't bother me if I don't see that show ever again. So I wasn't interested in the spin-off at the time, but I think I probably enjoy it now.
Yeah, spin-off is actually great. They take it on a different sort of like slant rather than having the laugh track. It's more of a coming of age type of thing. It's quite sweet in its own way, but hilarious in other ways. But yeah, Stuart Fails to Save the Universe is just top notch. Yeah.
When he mentioned Young Sheldon there, Charlotte, I thought that he was about to talk about younger Sherlock, because that's the show I've been watching on Amazon lately. That's got a kind of Doctor Who kind of quality to it. It's very sort of energetic.
Well, yeah, because those are based on books, aren't they? And it's sort of... I watched a little bit of it, and I struggle because I like Sherlock. It's one of my favourite sort of characters to always at least try whenever I see a new thing of that universe. But it felt very different. I think that's what put me off a little bit with the dynamic. I won't do spoilers too much, but they've very clearly swapped around what you'd expect from a Sherlock show with some of the characters, haven't they?
Yes, I've watched it. Yeah, loved it. For me, obviously, it's. I didn't realize it was from books, but I know it's supposed to be a prequel to the movies, the Guy Ritchie movies.
That's right. The books, well, they're based on books by Andy Lane, who is obviously a massive Doctor Who fan and a Doctor Who books writer. So sooner or later, by one route or another, everything does track back to Doctor Who, Mike. This is what we found doing this show.
Yeah, it does. Yes. But I must admit, yes, I didn't realize actually he wrote the books at all. I just assumed they were just TV scripts written by Guy Ritchie and his team. So I'll have to get into those. That sounds great. Yeah, I love that TV series, Young Sherlock. Brilliant. I love it.
I think there's quite a lot of them to get stuck into while you're at it. Not as much as Doctor Who itself, obviously. New Doctor Who has finally officially wrapped up over a year since the last TV episode was screened. We're still experiencing somewhat of a fallout, and signals are still very broken. They come through now and again. We do get them now and again. Before we get stuck into all of that, this is where I remind you each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is only a tap or two away on the device of your choice if you know exactly where to look. 150 plus other podcasts, a proper back and forth catalogue of reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists and lots of awesome guests, something for every fan over at type40.podbean.com. More about that a little later. And of course, we'll be making time to plug our sister and brother, cousins, and other podcasts across the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network too. I am reliably informed that TV rots your brain. Somebody's been telling me that my entire life, I think, since I was a kid. Charlotte, it was always said to me by family members that kid watches too much TV. He's obsessed with Doctor Who. That was a complaint that was often sort of fielded in my direction.
Well, I would get more of like, you're a bit obsessed with the Doctor Who aspect, that like my family now will mention certain things and would be like, are they from Doctor Who? And they just expect me to be able to say, yeah, they're from this episode, from this series. Not quite that level yet.
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with anything TV. I just loved it so much. I was a proper TV geek. And in my head, I always thought myself, my family sat around and watched TV together. But when I kind of talked to my sister about things, she kind of half remembers programs. She half remembers episodes. And I think they were all having a conversation and chatting and stuff, whereas I was just tunnel vision with absolutely everything, you name it, Blake Seven, Starsky and Hutch. I mean, I saw that you got round to Dallas. I think I saw every episode of Dallas and just adored it. What was it? Knots Landing. I always remember there was a program called Holmes and Yo-Yo, which was about this detective who had a robot as a partner.
You've lost me there.
Yeah, I talked to people. They go, no idea what you're talking about, Mike. And I searched it up on the internet. It did exist, but apparently it ran for one season. It was absolutely awful. So everyone, apart from me, expunged it from their memory.
I've got plenty of shows.
Yeah,
I've got plenty of shows like that nobody seems to remember. But yeah, we're going to touch base on some of those things. I don't doubt as the conversation rolls on. We're going to let fly with our inner and outer geeks. If you can do the sign, Live long.
I can't do it.
I can do both. I can do both. That's many years on your own with nothing to do at home when you've read your fourth Doctor Who book that day. So you practice that and juggling.
I realise that this is absolute heresy on a Doctor Who podcast, but we do have proof that they could be right. The normies could be right that TV may rot your brain, because it certainly didn't do Rose any favours, did it, when she stared into the heart of the TARDIS? But now and again, that does seem to work out in our favour. We've got the very latest from Billie Piper, aka Rose Tyler, aka The Moment, aka whoever the hell that was at the end of the last series. That's all coming up now. Sometimes, no matter how much one digs, there's no more dirt to bring up, at least for now. The last few years saw a drastic shift for Doctor Who fans, a speeding up of brand new episodes compared to recent years, certainly, and even the delivery of a long-promised spin-off. Truth was, though, that all was far from well between the various partners who'd brought us that latest era of Doctor Who, and our trusted sources had been telling us for an extended period how anything could happen and no one was getting on. I don't think I saw anybody predict, though, the breadth, the depth, and the stench that would come off the update from the BBC when it did arrive. Now, we recapped the impact, looked at the words of the main players on the last edition of the podcast. Now we have some words from the one poor soul left in the frame, whether she wanted to be, expected to be, or not. The companions of Doctor Who find that the series can follow them around almost as keenly as it does the Doctors, I think. But in the case of one actress in particular, that in itself has turned into a commitment or a burden of a lifetime. I don't know how she looks at this. It's completely understandable, because it was her name, her character's name, that was there in the dead centre of the original title sequence for episode 1 of The Big Comeback back in 2005. But all this time on, we find that Billie Piper, Rose Tyler, has now been left positively holding all the babies. 18 months ago, after the unplanned departure of Ncuti Gatwa, now with not just Russell T Davies, but the whole of Bad Wolf Studios following as well. Who would be Billie Piper right now, Charlotte? That's the question that's on my mind. Who on earth would want to be Billie Piper?
She has been put in probably the most awkward position, because it's hard enough when actors know things and they can't speak about it, like plot points or secrets that they need to keep under wraps until like the film comes out or a TV show goes out. But Billie sort of had that in the worst way, because she's been holding stuff back, which you get the impression even she doesn't quite understand what she's having to keep secret, and the people who should know better, also you get the impression, were just as much in the dark. So it was all this really odd sort of confusion. I think that's the word, that's the best way to describe what Billie's sort of been in the centre of since the reality war dropped, with her face, with no explanation, with no official title, with just Billie Piper returns, and that's it. That's all we got given. So yeah, she's been in a really awkward, confusing position, more than any other actor, I think, probably working in Britain currently in the last couple of years.
I would agree. I mean, what I've noticed, what I've considered, is that Billie Piper has other things going on. She's got a very full career here in Britain and on the other side of the Atlantic too, Mike. She's also still a mother, and she's still got those real world commitments that everybody has. But she does regularly, throughout most years, touch base with the Doctor Who fandom. She steps out onto a stage or goes onto a chat show or is part of some sort of documentary or VAM concerning some release or promotion somewhere, whereby she's sort of thrust back into the limelight again. I think the biggest of them all was last year a special edition of Doctor Who Unleashed, that documentary series where they put it together with David Tennant. So you see all these things that happen, but every time she's sort of left there to speak in her own voice, going off the sort of corporate line, it seems like it's nervous energy that's carrying her through. She's doing a lot of giggling. I think she's giggling because she feels nervous, not because she's happy, but because it feels like she could step on a rake at any moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I think with obviously Billie, she's probably the longest serving member of Doctor Who ever, because she's actually kind of done it right from the first episode right to the last one. So she of all people probably knows as you know, Charlotte, you said she knows what she can say and what not normally she can say. Or even when the first hiatus came along, there was very much probably like, oh well, we're still in talks with the BBC, you know, hopefully there'll be an episode. But she doesn't know what to say. And obviously she doesn't want to put her foot in it by saying something that she could say, like, you know, it happened with, what's his name? Darth Vader. He said something like, Luke could be my son. He just guessed. And he happened to get the plot right, but he got into trouble for that. And you don't want to be in that situation where you say completely something off cuff and actually find that you've actually spoiled something or done something wrong. So I could imagine she's actually probably very much on tenterhooks and really has to watch what she says all the time, because she doesn't. It's easy to know what to not say, you know, when if you know. But the trouble is, obviously, if you don't know anything, then you're really worried that you could just put your foot in it at any time. You don't want to obviously give false hope, but you don't want to obviously say something that's going to just upset the apple cart either.
She always seems so grateful, but loyal as well, Charlotte, to the people who've given her starts in her career, who've taken a chance on her when others maybe wouldn't have done, from when she was a pop star or even after she'd come out of Doctor Who. People pigeonhole actors, singers, entertainers all the time. And Billie, having been very much in this world since she was in her mid-teens, like even before being a pop star, she was plastered all over magazine covers and things like that. So I think Mike's actually on the money there. I think she's very, very seasoned, and obviously has spent the bulk of that time on Doctor Who and speaking and dealing with the likes of us. This last weekend, as of time of recording, this is where she was. She was one of the many guests at the event For the Love of Fantasy and Sci-Fi. Now, this is held a couple of times a year. I know that. It's one of those sort of big expos. This time at the XL on the Royal Victoria Dock. Lots of other actresses and actors and other people from the world of film and TV. They were all present to sign whatever people were asking them to sign within reason, I would imagine, and face a panel too to take questions and do all that thing that they usually do. So we've seen her do this time and time again before. But the headline coming off the back of this latest event was that Billie Piper tells Doctor Who fans to chill out, which I thought that doesn't sound a lot like Billie here. But she did address the crowds and handled the speculation surrounding her future with the series after all this time, after well over a year. Nobody is ever going to forget that surprise appearance at the end of the reality war for one reason or another. And it's not going to let her go anytime soon. But we also know that Billie Piper has worked on several other series, movies, and even a short film since recording that shortest of short excerpts there, which they tagged on the end of the last series of Doctor Who. And you can see, you can hear in the sound of her voice how she never expected to keep following her around in the way that it has 18 months on. All of this was captured on video by several fans who were in attendance. I'm happy to say you can always rely on the Doctor Who fan base, Charlotte.
Yeah, especially when it's the actors are physically at a convention. And like you said, I think even she was always going to get extra attention going to any conventions. While, like you said, that cliffhanger is still this unresolved plot point, to put it lightly. It's, I think that's the sort of thing of, I don't think she was naive that she didn't realise it would get attention, because like you said, she's been in the industry for how many years now, and she knows what, like Mike said, what Doctor Who and sort of Rose have become such a big part of the modern run. But a bit of me thinks maybe she didn't quite realise how much it would follow her for how long. That's what I'm thinking now. She probably thought, oh, it would cause a noise, it would get questions, but the fact that a year afterwards fans are still asking her the same questions, maybe she didn't quite realise that would happen. I don't know.
She can run, but she can't hide. Not forever, at any rate. This was always going to happen. I knew it was going to be this year. And we have the clip of the big question right here, right now. Check it out.
I am not the next Doctor. I am Rose Tyler in hiatus. There we go. Sorry, that's a really cryptic answer, but because I'm not currently filming Doctor Who as the Doctor, I can't, lie and say otherwise. Sweating. I hate this.
I am not the next Doctor. I am Rose Tyler in hiatus. The word hiatus sends a shiver up the spines of most Doctor Who fans. Mike, I don't think Billie could possibly have known that she was digging up so much unresolved tension and hitting so much scar tissue there, could she?
No, because when she said the word hiatus, that's the one I thought. Let's just think about this, because I in my head I thought myself, is she just told this by her agent, or are we gonna break down every single word like a Gallifreyan puzzle? And I'm gonna go for the latter, obviously.
Okay.
And so in hiatus, I thought of it two ways. I thought myself, well, yeah, she's saying I'm not the next Doctor, but I'm Rose Tyler in hiatus, which means obviously she's not going to be in the show for a while. But I thought, does that double up saying the show's not going to be around for a while? Is the show now officially in hiatus as well? But I thought it was very interesting that she did say, I am not the next Doctor. That was interesting, because I think she's basically made it clear that regeneration is not the next Doctor, which I thought was quite... I thought that was quite a lot. I got quite excited by that, in fact, because I thought myself, well, there's definitely some thought behind this, because obviously my original thing when I didn't see it, obviously. I was like most people. You sort of woke up one morning and there it was on your Facebook and there it was on the BBC website. I think I saw it about 8 times before I actually watched the damn episode. I was quite annoyed about that. But then when I watched it, I thought to myself, is this just like RTD shoving it in? Like, did you hear about when he put the shackler in? He says, he thought it'd be a bit of fun. I thought, don't do that to Doctor Who fans. We don't like We don't like fun. We don't like fun. We want a 40-page document of why the Shack of the Doctor was in there.
It's a deadly serious business.
We have 8 episodes of Type 40 discussing each pages. So I actually worked that in my head. Actually, the maths there. And so that's what I thought this was. But actually, her saying I'm not the next Doctor makes you go, okay. So how is this? Could this be like the 50th anniversary? Is she that character? You know. So yeah, my mind did get working there.
I've got to be honest, Charlotte. When I heard her say that, my first thought was, thank God for that.
I think honestly that is, I think she had to say that sentence because of the reaction to her appearing at the end of Reality War, because it was so weird that I remember, because I watched the episodes when it went out. I wasn't like you guys and sort of saw all the stuff afterwards. And my reaction watching it, I can remember is just, no, Russell, what are you playing at? Why have you done this? And then I looked online, and it was like a universal thing of everybody going, no, you've gone too far. Like, that's the one face which has got too much weight behind it to just be like a fluky regeneration. So and like I said at the time, all the press release that went out and all the stuff afterwards wasn't saying, oh, she's not important, but it wasn't saying she was the Doctor. So it was like, what is she? So I think that sentence it feels like to me, somebody has almost fed her that first bit just to say, right, just say to the fans, you're not the next Doctor. Because I think there was still debates about that online, whether she was a Doctor or not.
Well, if you remember,
I think it's been done to put that to bed.
Well, if you remember, the odd thing she said here and there, which wasn't much, it was pretty obvious that Billie herself had no idea what was going on, who she was meant to be playing, or why, what had come before, what could possibly come afterwards. And she seemed to be hanging on to each conversation she had for dear life. I think when she says that she's Rose Tyler in hiatus, that's effectively her saying, yeah, it's okay. It's me playing the same character I've always played, the character that you like me to play, the character that I've inhabited for over 20 years, and I feel fits me like a glove, Charlotte. That's kind of my reading of it.
Yeah, and I think there was enough clues, if you want to use that term, in it to sort of go, this could easily be a Rose sort of taking over regeneration, I think was a theory I saw, because we had her in the 50th as Bad Wolf, but as that face, you could go back. We've had precedent for this, like she can come back in a role and not be technically Rose, but be Rose. That was sort of the double-edged sword of using Billie, that she's the one companion that you could sort of go back and go, oh, this makes sense. But because of how important she was to try and make out an issue that maybe she's a Doctor, it was like, no, you can't do that. Because I remember on the YouTube Doctor Who official site, they did all the regenerations. They do these now and again, these like compilation things, streams. And they had all the regenerations, and then they put Billie at the end of it.
Okay. How did that work out for them? comment.
What the fan base is like? Then the fan base is like, you just put her in a regeneration like clip. Does that mean she's a Doctor? Like, there was so much. I think that was the problem. There was so many mixed messages from the BBC, from Russell, and because of, like you said, Billie not quite knowing what she could say, Billie herself, that it was just this absolute muddle. And I think this is her clearing the air with the Rose Tyler comment.
They just wanted to get something on air. I think she looked rather relaxed while she was saying that part. She seemed rather comfortable. But as she continued speaking, that's when things started to change. And when you could see her sink into her seat there at the Excel as time went on, you could hear the tension sort of gradually ring out. Sorry, that's a really cryptic answer, she continued, but I'm not currently filming Doctor Who as the Doctor. I can't lie and say otherwise. And that was when she sort of threw herself back a little and sort of put her head in her hands. I'm sweating. I hate this, she said. And even though, again, she was laughing, nervously laughing, I felt she really meant that, Charlotte. I felt so sorry for her.
Mm.
Yeah, that was, I think, a very human moment, especially that I hate this. I don't think you can disguise when something utterly is frustrating you, when something's sort of been this weight that you've had to carry. And I think this is her sort of, because it feels like she's somewhere above her, or somebody has sort of said, you can be a bit more honest now. That's the feeling I get. I could be very much wrong, but just the way Billie was, and the fact that she can sort of say, I hate this, like, that's a very precise word, hate.
Well, keep in mind, Charlotte, that when she was talking about this last year at various conventions, she wasn't technically under any form of NDA at all. She was never contracted for any appearances whatsoever. As I understand it, she was asked to do that little bit and piece the day before, or maybe the day before it was actually recorded. So nothing was ever signed. That was all done on a handshake. And the sealed lips on the matter were there solely out of loyalty for the people who she's worked for off and on for 20 odd years, and sort of faith in them that they would make good on it and that everything would turn out okay in the end, and that she wouldn't be left in the situation that she's ended up finding herself in.
Yeah, and like you said, we've had a year with now nothing even to explain it. Like, even if they never on screen resolve the Rose cliffhanger, I think somebody from Bad Wolf, and it should be Russell, honestly, but just somebody needs to come out and actually explain it. And just sort of put that final thing to bed, so then whatever comes next can not have this sort of as this sort of plot thread that's just hanging there.
I think the issue is that there's nothing to explain, that it was never thought about in terms of story any further into the future than just get it filmed, get it out so we can all sod off. That seems to be the impression that I was getting. Doctor Who fans being Doctor Who fans, though, Mike, I was listening back to this and sort of reading it through, and I thought, there's going to be fans out there. They're going to be jumping through the holes in this. Okay, so she's not currently filming Doctor Who as the Doctor, but she could currently be filming Doctor Who as Rose Tyler or as the Moment. So far, though, I'm happy to say that Doctor Who fans seem to have resisted taking that particular bait. But what did you think when you saw this? I mean, my heart really went out to Billie Piper, I have to admit.
Yeah, I'm like you. My heart did go out to her big time, because I think, I would just assume. I mean, as you say, because she is a parent as well. She's busy all the time. I mean, surely she's in demand for absolutely lots and lots and lots of work, interviews, you name it. She's probably doing podcasts and guests on here and little voiceovers for stuff. So she probably part of her probably coming in at the 11th hour was probably like, we need you to film this bit. Well, I'm free tomorrow. It was probably more on her terms. She had a window. She probably ran in, did it, walked out, and now for that little hour she probably went in and filmed, she's now got all this crap piled on top of her. Yeah. And I think that's probably what, in a way, is what she's feeling. She goes, look, I literally just walked in, filmed it. I'm a professional. I went, ooh, hello, walked off. That was it. And now I've got the whole of fandom breathing down my neck all the time. So I'll be honest with you. When I initially saw that, I'm not filming currently as the Doctor, but I can't lay and say otherwise. I did think, but are you filming as Billie, as Rose? But then I thought, no, they're not filming anything at the moment. So my hopes kind of got up there. But it'd be like if they were filming anything, somebody would have some wind of it somewhere.
Of course they would. She did say more. Let's take a look at what else Billie Piper had to say there on stage at the XL.
There, because it just means we have to stay tuned, right?
I think you've all got to be very patient. Yes, it will be worth it when it comes. And I think that we need to celebrate the fact that the show has been on the air for 26. Is it 26 years? The new reincarnation.
Right.
2005. Anyway, it's been around for a very long time. It's massively successful, and it's impacted so many people's lives positively, and it's had a bit of a rough time lately, and I think everyone just needs to chill out and wait for what comes from having the space and time.
There you go. Well said.
Chill out, Doctor Who fans. Chill out.
Never.
She can't possibly be referring to us, Charlotte. Surely, I think you've all got to be very patient because it'll be worth it when it comes. Now, she can't possibly know the amount of gaslighting and bullshit the Doctor Who fan base has been subjected to by showrunners, executives, and unwilling talents in the last 18 months in particular, can she? So I'll even let her off this because, Charlotte, I think Doctor Who fans have been incredibly patient and understanding. For all that I joke about how entitled we can be, myself included, we have been very, very patient with this brand and those who were pulling the strings.
Yeah, when Russell came back, it was with sort of this almost the most happiest I think the fandom had been in years at that point. It was like, oh, Russell's coming back, like the guy you did in 2005 and was so good then. And then I think there was a lot of sort of appetite for when Shooty got announced. So I think fans were very up for it. And then we got served what we got served. And I think on the whole, it just didn't work, to put it bluntly, for multiple reasons. So we've been very patient. Like you said, we've had Russell especially basically for a year tell us a special was going to come, talk about a script, talk about words in the script. We've been having all this sort of song and dance of Doctor Who's, you're going to get Christmas special, you're going to get Christmas special. And then it got cancelled. And then we've, ever since that, sort of, like you said, the update went out, it's been absolutely radio silence. So I think being told to be patient, I think in any other time, it wouldn't be such a sort of ill-timed thing to say. But because of what's happened, it's like, no, that's the last thing fans want to hear, I think, right now. In certain cases.
Well, context is everything, and I suppose we have got to dial it back to the fact that the person who said this isn't in any position of power to make anything happen whatsoever. All that is within their power in that moment is to make the people who are sat before her, Mike, or those that she probably realised that this would travel, and she knew that people would report on this. So if we could make them feel better just for a little, and obviously take some of the heat off her in that moment as well. I think that's literally all that was on Billie Piper's mind at that moment in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you that part there, we said you got to be very patient because it'll be worth it when it comes. I think that it's just her being kind to the show and being kind to the fans, because I think she, it's one of those things she doesn't know what to say. So I think actually that's quite a nicely worded thing, just to kind of try to placate something. But as you said, though, we're not very patient people. We need our morsels. We need them badly. And it'll be worth it when it comes. Well, we've heard that before because we thought that with RTD Mark II, and it wasn't worth it when it came, was it? Let's be honest with you.
Or the Chris Chibnall era.
Yeah. So, I think, my heart goes out to her to have a lot of this on her. But then, it's like, it's at least she's out there. Do you know what I mean? I don't mind. I wouldn't mind that being me, sort of like with the heat coming down on me, with everyone staring at you and all the conventions and stuff. So, there's worse things that could be happening.
Of course there is. When I see words like patient, Charlotte, again, this is not on Billie at all, but I think how much more patient do Doctor Who fans have to be? If I'm honest, we have demonstrated considerable patience, not only through two massive breakdowns of successive versions of the show, the RTD2 era, the appalling Chris Chibnall era before it, but if I'm honest, midway through Stephen Moffat's tenure, that was when the BBC at large, not necessarily Moffat himself, and certainly not Matt Smith or Peter Capaldi, but that's when the BBC itself started to take Doctor Who fans a little bit for granted and test our patience. So this has been going on for over a decade.
Mm.
Yeah, and I agree with you. What my issue with the word patient is more to do with just, like I said, timing. It's nothing against Billie, because like you said, she's been working. She's been on Wednesday. She's been doing her like indie movies. So she won't have a clue, right, at all
No.
about sort of the day in and out that's been happening with Russell and the show and the fans. And I agree with Mike. I think she's trying to be reassuring here. But like I said, it's just timing. I think that's just the top and tail of it. It's just, she can't help that. It's just the worst timing right now, I think, to say anything, because we're
Charlotte,
in this situation.
Charlotte, I'd even go so far as to say that Billie Piper can probably go for several days without giving Doctor Who a passing thought.
Oh yeah, because she's a very successful actress.
And yet here she is, kind of forced or moved to answer for people who have left her in the frame, holding the bag, if you like. And she did go on to say a little bit more. I think that we need to celebrate the fact that the revived show has been around for a very long time. It's massively successful, and it's impacting so many people's lives positively, she went on to say. Again, I don't think anybody would argue with that, Mike. I think that's self-explanatory. It will be of more worth to some than others. I think that to a great many of us, even the fan base, it's just a telly show, and we don't care how it impacts people's lives positively once they turn the telly off or press the stop button or skip to the next show. So I haven't got any objection to anything that she's saying, but this is where we sort of, when people have got a little bit more time to think about it, it's a case of, okay, now what should I say now? What would the company, what would Russell T Davies want me to say now? That was the feeling I got about this.
Yeah, I think it's nice to go, yeah, it's impacting so many people's lives positively. It's been around for a long time. But in a way, you kind of, the thing about I've always found that when it was Matt Smith's era and he started splitting it into sort of like, 6 episodes there, then the following year, another 6 episodes. Was it series 5, wasn't it? I think somebody even sort of said, well, can't you just call it series 6 and series 7, series 5 and series 6, sorry.
Yeah.
And you go, why are you messing around with the show? It's a show. We like it. Just every year, chuck out your 13 episodes. Give us our Christmas episodes. And I think part of the problem is, it's been revived. It's been around for a very long time. I think it could have been around for longer. It could have carried on. If they just stuck to that format, they didn't keep mucking around with it and sticking their oar in. Because, we were talking about Big Bang Theory, and as you pointed out, you think by the end it kind of went on for a little too long. I think obviously the difference with programs like that is they always have something they're going to aim for an ending. American shows do that. They always sort of almost like to know, well,
there's a natural shape.
Yeah,
to the
Big Bang Theory, he's going to get, what do you call it? He's going to get the Nobel Prize. That's probably going to be the last episode because he always talks about it. And in Sheldon, he's eventually going to go to college and grow up to be Sheldon. So there has to be some sort of cutoff point. With Doctor Who, there isn't, and it could just keep going on. I just think it's just the shoehorn. I don't actually know. I'm going off at a tangent here. It's probably like my annoyance of the show. Because since halfway through Matt Smith, it has become very fragmented. I think that's actually been a problem as well.
That's what I meant in the fact that they felt that the show was incredibly popular at that point. They'd captured America, and it's as if at that point, strangely, when they should have been going harder in making more of it and promoting it even harder, they decided to take their foot off the gas completely, split it up into 2 seasons so that people couldn't necessarily keep track on when the next bunch of episodes was coming, and relying on the fan base, on people like us, to continue telling those people we were maybe connected with on Facebook or in the earlier days of social media to say, oh, Doctor Who's back on Saturday. They sort of let the fans do the PR for them, I think, Charlotte. And that's what I mean about having taken the fan base for granted for a long period of time. I mean, I agree with Billie. Of course we should be celebrating the fact that Doctor Who managed 20 years on television more or less without breaks. Those gap years were a pain in the arse. None of us enjoyed those. But at least it was still on, and we always knew roughly when the next episode was coming, even if it was 6 months or a year till the next Christmas special. I think that's perfectly sound. And yeah, maybe we should think about that which we've had rather than that which we haven't. But it would be a lot easier to take Billie's advice had we not been lied to for the last 10 months.
Yeah, I think Billie here is just sort of going back to Doctor Who as a whole, isn't she? She's saying the whole or sort of this modern run, the fact that it's got to where it's got is impressive, and it is, because back in 2005 it was an absolute gamble that Doctor Who got brought back. Like, I know you've spoken about this more, and a few others who were sort of were a bit more of the older fans seeing it come back in that point. It was this real thing of, oh, is it going to work? Like that feeling. So the fact that it hit so hard and then it carried on is a success. And I think I think what she's saying about the impact there, and I think that's very much to do with where she is when she's saying these things, because she's at a convention, so she's going to be very much front facing with fans. She's going to have people come to her to sign things, isn't she, and things like that. And I think that when you're doing that, that's the most sort of perfect.
I hadn't thought of that.
That's the most perfect and clear example, I think, for any actor, that this does impact the people, like on that personal level, when you can do that. So I think
if you've just had people waiting in line and you've met for say 2 or 3 hours, you've been meeting various people who've told you you're my first Doctor Who companion. You know, somebody pulls down their shorts, they got Rose Tyler tattooed on their arse cheek. Then
sorry about
that. But now you've mentioned it, Charlotte. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, because like you said, especially I think Billie's going to have that uniqueness of people my age who first watched in 2005. She was our entry point. It was Rosie was the main part of that story. Like the Doctor was there, but it was Rosie's story. So you sort of connected with her on that level so clearly, and that's why Rosie's was such a brilliant first episode. So I think for her, she has got that experience tenfold. So for her, actually, the fan experience is really important, if I'm being honest. That's the impression I get, especially because I said she's at a convention, she does lots of them for years and years and years.
She went on to say, to acknowledge the fact that Doctor Who, for all of its huge popularity on its return in 2005 and for quite a long time after that, that recently it's had a rough time. Bit of an understatement, but I like the fact that it's a clean statement and that she's aware of that, Charlotte. That message has been received.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she's not doing the PR thing of sort of saying, no, everything's fine. It's like that response, I think, is her having to admit, like you said, very much so.
Doesn't quite live in the bubble that we sometimes think that these celebrities, these stars do. I think everyone just needs to chill out and wait for what comes from having space and time. She's very pleased with herself for that final remark in the clip there, Mike. You can see her chuckling to herself that she's just sort of freewheeled that in her head. And it's very amusing. It's very sort of connective with all of us. It makes her feel like she's one of us. And when you hear how she delivered the words, I think everyone just needs to chill out. I think it's impossible to take any kind of offence at that. What do you think?
I think I looked at the space and time thing, and I must admit I kind of I tore that apart a little bit in my head. I went, does she literally mean space? You know, you need to give it a bit of space. You need to wait, give it a bit of time. Do you know what I mean? We are on, and Rose is on hiatus. I just think that's her little thing of saying, maybe not that she knows personally, but maybe she knows from being in the industry for a long time. Look, if nothing's happening right now, it's going to take at least X amount of years within all the best will in the world for it to come along. And I do think, actually, because I do think she is a fan of the show. I think she when you hear interviews with her and she talks about it, I think she enjoys it. But I think personally that little bit where she said it's had a bit of a rough time recently. I think she's saying, I watched it was crap.
What do you think, Charlotte?
I don't know if she'd watched it, but only because of just scheduling and how busy she is.
I don't know. I just feel when I look, it's had a bit of a rough time recently. It's like I always remember I went to see a play. It was awful. My friend was in it, and I said, "Oh, what did we say to him?" And my mate goes, "I've got it." And he went up to him and goes, "Oh, did you enjoy being in that?" or something like that. He asked him a question because it was so bad. We literally couldn't. We couldn't even lie. We couldn't think of what to say. But thank God our friend went, "Guys, it was rubbish, wasn't it? Bloody awful that was." I think that's her way of actually saying it was a load of old rubbish.
I think you could be right. I am not the next Doctor. I am Rose Tyler in hiatus, said Billie Piper, August 2026. I'd like to think that nobody's going to pester her on this for a little while yet, Charlotte, but when do you think, when will be the next time that it will be that Billie Piper's forced to answer the same old question? Do you think that people might leave her alone?
I think this will sort of make fans a little bit less wanting to pester her because, like I said, the big old question has been overhanging everything is she a doctor? I think that was the main thing that fans sort of had in their heads because of all the sort of the weirdness surrounding how it happened on screen. So now she's come out and sort of been very straight. I'm not the next Doctor. I'm Rose. So I think that's been answered. But knowing Doctor Who fans, I think there'll always be a bit of that curiosity around it because, like I said, it's this unanswered aspect. And especially if this sort of hiatus we're in takes a while for the show to get back on air again, it's just going to keep feeding into that. I think honestly the time when she'll probably less likely have to answer anything is when the show is back on air and it's just doing its own thing again, so then fans can move on and concentrate on that, not this thing with Billie.
Have somebody else to focus our fire on, because it's one thing to tell a UK audience that, a homegrown audience. This woman travels all over the world in the company of co-stars, both Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant, just in the last 18 months, 2 or 3 times. And you can tell they're both very supportive. They've been supportive of her throughout that time. So, yeah, I think we probably will hear another version of this at some point. And maybe as she gets more comfortable speaking, perhaps a little more may creep out. Maybe she still will start to express some sort of frustration. Maybe she'll feel that it's okay to laugh at how silly it all is, because I think it's ferociously silly, Mike. I really do. Doctor Who, I take Doctor Who pretty seriously as you can take it. But the situation that we all collectively find ourselves in, as regrettable as it is, I think the healthy thing to do at this point now is to sit back and laugh.
I think so. Laugh. But you know what? I think for me, actually, half the fun and enjoyment of it is doing things like this, being on Type 40 and taking her one paragraph and pulling it apart. There's no harm in that. I think it's great. It's great
Getting
fun.
Right into it.
Because I can't do it at home. Seriously, nobody no one will give me the time of day with this. I can't. I'm like you, Charlotte. I literally can't say anything without saying, "Well, what's that on Doctor Who?" I said, "No." I said, "Who wants a cup of tea?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was it on Doctor Who? Well, did you make a cup of tea? Actually, yes. There was an episode where he poured it into the console. It's that kind of.
Yeah, you could always nudge somebody in the post office queue or at the bus stop or the cash point.
I've tried that. I got restraining orders now. So
I mean, the frustrating thing for me in all of this, Charlotte, is that it all draws fire away from the one man who probably should have said a little bit more. Even though I was sick of the sound of the voice of Russell T Davies, this guy, I don't wish to hear from this guy anytime soon. I do feel that he owes the general audience, the dedicated audience, and his colleagues more of an explanation. And I've wondered, given the tone and some of the things that Billie said there about it's had a rough time lately, maybe she has had conversations with Russell or Julie Gardner or somebody at Bad Wolf in the time in between. I don't know. I think we'll probably never really know that.
It will be interesting to sort of the conversations, which I think we'll never fully know, but just sort of the like you said, the conversations between actors or producers after the announcement went out about the cancellation of the Christmas special. Sort of, what were they saying behind closed doors to each other? Because as fans, we've sort of got our experience of it. But at the end of the day, like, Bad Wolf lost a major program. Like, this was a big deal that they had Doctor Who, and they got it taken off them, basically off the BBC. And that's to do with Russell, and I said at the time, I think they've got some of the blame here because they allowed certain decisions to happen, certain writing choices to happen. So it's sort of, what in the industry are they saying? I think that's sort of something we'll never know, but it's sort of intriguing to think, do they have those conversations? Have they sort of started to sort of put blame a little bit, if that's the word I'm trying to think of here? Like, that would be interesting, but we'll never know.
I think Billie Piper's been incredible this last 18 months, and it's time that we all gave her a bit of a break, started asking her questions about filming Age of Steel again, maybe something like that, or Day of the Doctor. Go back to the questions that she can answer where she's in full possession of all the facts, and maybe to bring back happier times that brought people together, rather than talk about things that have brought us enormous frustration and embarrassment and things like that. I think as fans, we must accept what's now right under our noses, what's all too evident. She knows nothing, she knew nothing, and none of it was really anything to do with her. But Doctor Who fans, I think the show itself and the fans do mean, in relative terms, I do think they mean a lot to her. Just as you said, Mike, I think the fact that she's been associated with this part of this show for over 2 decades, most of her adult life, I don't think that will have escaped Billie Piper at all.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, she's literally opened the whole of the first series. This like the second generation of the show. She's opened it and closed it, basically. Like, she's literally the first face you see in Rose. She's the last face you see in the Reality War.
We may know more in time, Charlotte, just as the lady says. Billie Piper was at For the Love of Fantasy and Sci-Fi 2026 at London's Excel. You can go and find their website through the link in the description. You can book up for their events that they're coming towards the end of this year and into next year too. They'll publish all the upcoming guests and everything else. Our thanks to the fans who kindly thought to record her answer to that question, not just for our benefit, but maybe for Billie Piper's too. Let's take a break for a shuffle and skip across the time streams in the company of our Kev, Airtime Lord, and here to tempt you with further food for your ears from across the Fandom Podcast Network. We'll be back in a bit.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And you can treat yourself or treat your other selves to a little something from a selection of merchandise over at the Fandom Podcast Network's TeePublic store. There's a link to all of that in the show notes. It all goes right back into supporting the network in its continuing mission to keep you topped up with the very best in geeky pop culture coverage, so everybody wins. We're back with more of your Type 40, the past, the present, and the future of all things Doctor Who, just not necessarily in that order. I'm suitably refreshed. And the panel are still with me. I've got Charlotte Shields and Mike Belgrave here as well. We've been pulling apart poor Billie Piper's latest statement there at that convention for the love of fantasy and science fiction. Whether she'll turn up next year or not, who knows? Who knows? It was her character, of course, that was, yeah, I agree, Charlotte, the entry-level character for the entirety of New Who, for a generation of people. And, yeah, will always have this wealth of affection to send in her direction. I think that's never really going to change. Billie Piper would have to do something pretty drastic to disenfranchise Doctor Who fans, I believe. There are other individuals that are attached to those early days of the new series who we are also very fond of. And just like in every aspect of life and every community, every family for that matter, there are people within those groups who like to speak and insist on offering their opinions and dropping their takes all the time. Try stopping them. But there are just as frequently, just as often, individuals who hold their tongues, who choose to speak less frequently. And so when they do, whatever they're communicating, they've often had an extended time to give consideration to let it cook, if you like. Mark Gatiss has been a name synonymous with Doctor Who since I'd say well over a decade before the show actually returned to television. So the old Virgin New Adventures books. He's an idiosyncratic man, that can't be doubted. And a great many people do consider him to be one of an elite, if you like. He's done very well, thank you very much, out of being associated with Doctor Who. One of a similar kind of breed of people who we associate with a kind of geekiness and an arrested childhood. I'm thinking of characters like Kevin Smith, for example. Mark Gatiss is kind of a British Kevin Smith. The thing is, where Gatiss is worth listening to over such characters is that not only is he very accomplished all these decades on, but in that time in between, he's also done a lot of growing up. He's political when he's moved to speak, but he's never partisan. He's not an activist, and he's certainly no gobshite. This week, he's been out promoting his next project, a brand new series of his detective show, Bookish. So, yeah, have you heard that Mark Gatiss has been speaking about Doctor Who again, Charlotte?
Yes, because he was talking about the current situation we're in, so it travelled quite far, these comments.
I think it would have travelled far even if we were deluged with news, but hearing comments from somebody who's so closely associated with Doctor Who, despite his own successes as part of the comedy troupe The League of Gentlemen, for example, Mike, or as co-creator of Sherlock, amongst heaven knows how many other things, Mark Gatiss continues to be very closely tied to Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, very, very close. I mean, exactly what you were saying earlier. I think he doesn't just come as someone that he's not just a fan. He's not just a big integral part of BBC output and Doctor Who. He was actually also there being productive in the wilderness years. You know, in a way, he was one of the people that helped to bring. It actually was, you know, how I always feel like the wilderness years was. It was like a great time. In a way, it was very fertile. It almost started to breed the people that went on to do the series when it came back again.
Yeah.
So he's actually one of those people. I mean, he ticks every single box. So I feel like, yeah, I always take everything that he says, not with a pinch of salt at all. I take it seriously. And sometimes when he was talking, I felt that his comments were very much like a fan that was in the know. You know, so it was his opinion, and as a fan and someone that has an inside knowledge as well.
Beginning with The Unquiet Dead back in 2005, Mark Gatiss went on to write 8 stories for the new series across multiple incarnations of the Doctor, and even appeared with most of them too, acted in 4 different roles scattered throughout those seasons between 2005 and 2017. He managed to disappear into all of these parts, Charlotte, I think.
Yeah, I think some he sort of hammed up quite a lot, and then in other parts he sort of dialed it down a little bit, but he was always a little bit on the theatrical side, wasn't he, in his roles? And like sort of Mike said and you said, he was such a big part of just the writing of the modern run and just being sort of seen as almost like a third wheel to Russell or Moffat or those sort of characters. Mark was very much in that mix. So he's got also a real sort of production experience to go with what he says.
Real world experience too, running his own shows. And that's what's going to bring him into contact with organs such as the Radio Times. And when they're promoting series like Bookish, which did very, very well for him last year, people love that show on the channel You and Alibi. That aligns perfectly with Radio Times' general readership. But if they can ask him about Doctor Who as well, it also guarantees them numerous clicks off their various social medias. Bookish itself co-stars Paul McGann and Blake Harrison, so there's plenty in there for Doctor Who fans to enjoy. But Radio Times did take the time to press him on the current plight of Doctor Who as an industry pro and as a fan. So this is what Mark Gatiss had to say. I think the BBC putting it out to tender is a perfectly great idea. But we've been here before. So Gatiss, of course, referring to the fact that in that update from the BBC that we recapped on the last podcast, they did go to great pains to make it clear that it wasn't the end. It's not the end. We are going to offer it out to tender. We are. Some of us are taking that more seriously than others. You know, some people are counting the days and are sort of expecting to hear something very, very soon, whilst others are happy to do as Billie Piper says and sort of sit on our hands and be very, very patient. But Mark Gatiss seems to adopt a different approach here, I think. I think the BBC putting it out to tender is a perfectly great idea, but we've been here before, Charlotte. Trepidatious is how he sounds, trepidatious.
Yeah, I think that's very much the words of an experienced fan, isn't it? He's talking about the 80s. He's talking about when Doctor Who did go out of production and it had this sort of what's going to happen next sort of energy around the whole programme. So I think this is sort of a bit of a wise head talking here.
He's also a man who produces, writes, stars in his own TV shows as an independent producer and has done, again, for the best part of 30 years.
Yeah, it is sort of that interesting aspect of he knows how hard it is to get a programme up, going, scripting it, getting the actors in, getting your sets sorted, like all of that aspect he has had to do. So yeah, that's another sort of hat he sort of can uniquely sort of wear when it comes to this situation, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, he probably could sit there and say, okay, this show Bookish that's come on, actually, I technically started it 9 years ago. You know, I had the idea for it, I wrote it, I started putting it out there, you know, and actually you had meetings and they, you know, you have to have a schedule for it. You know, there has to be a schedule to film it. There has to be a schedule to get actors in, you know, there's all sorts of things that can just put it into production hell for such a long time. He'd know that more than anybody else.
He went on to say, Mike, I personally just feel like this iteration has kind of run its course and you want people to miss it. This is a sentiment that most of us on Type 40 have expressed at one time or another. I think some of us have felt this way for a really long time, or nearly a decade in some cases, whereas others have been gradually nudged here.
I think it's literally, I think it goes back to Billy saying, you know, what was their comment again about it's about a bit of a rough time. I think that's in a way, this is his way of saying it's been a bit crap recently, isn't it?
So this is Gatiss's version of the same thing.
Yeah, basically, I think they're both saying the same thing. They're very politely saying it's been a bit crap recently, hasn't it? You know, and you want people to miss it. No, when I saw that, I think this is going back to our original Wilderness years, and I think that worked then. I think the slight problem you've got now is, people, they've got more, haven't they? You know, what would you say? People are more fragmented in a way, you could say. And I think the trouble is, if you let it go longer, will people miss it? Apart from, obviously, we'll all miss it, but your general public, will they miss it, or will actually just create a certain amount of indifference after a while? It'll be like, I mean, are people desperate to have, Starsky and Hutch back on TV? I mean, I know I am. Don't get me wrong.
Well, or even shows that finished, say, 15 to 20 years ago. I'm thinking kids shows like Raven, MI High, the BBC series of Robin Hood or Merlin, Charlotte. That generation of shows would sort of be the equivalent now. Have people got round to the place where they're nostalgic for those shows and are perhaps looking for Colin Morgan to come back to Merlin and do a special, do a series, that kind of thing. I think that's the sort of yardstick to put it at. I think Mike's right that Doctor Who could actually gather some dust before people start to miss it again. What's your instinct about what Mark has said here?
I think I agree. I think he's very much drawing from the 80s again here with that idea of you want people to miss it. Because I think when something has been on and it starts to deteriorate and you're sort of in that mindset of, oh, it's not that good. And I think that was very much the mindset back then in the 80s as well. That the more distance you have from that, the less you sort of forget those emotions and feelings of not liking it. I think we were all a bit wired that way as human beings. So I think he's talking to that. And I think as well, he's sort of saying it's run its course. I think the writing was starting for a while, if we're being honest with ourselves, was starting to show that we weren't getting enough newer, fresher ideas in the show. We were sort of relying on, oh, it's the Master again at the finale. Like, it sort of... It felt like the writers were sort of circling lots of things that they'd already done. So it's like, you also need that space to sort of to have time to think about those fresher and newer ideas for the show. And that's also what the 80s did, because you had the books, you had so many other things that people just experimented very much. And sort of did sort of these wacky ideas with the Doctor and the show. That that were never going to be on TV, but they could do it in a book. So I think he's touching quite a few different things, I feel, with those statements. He's sort of, a lot of stuff's getting covered.
He goes on to talk directly to the point of the original hiatus, the end of classic Doctor Who. When it was cancelled in 1989, the BBC made a big statement saying, we're committed to taking Doctor Who through the 90s. They put it out to tender then, and then it just quietly didn't happen. And I have a feeling maybe that's what's going to happen. Says Mark Gatiss in August 2026, that history could repeat itself, maybe moving in a cycle. I suppose it's the natural order of things, even, Charlotte, that we find ourselves where we are, out of creative exhaustion, audience fatigue, go woke, go broke, even, all of those things.
To be honest, when I saw his comments, and this was the bit that I thought when I read them initially, that is probably one of the most honest things somebody said in the last couple of months. Because I feel like Russell and the other players have sort of always had to try and make it, oh, it's going to come back, everything's fine, like trying to have this sort of veneer of we can't, everything has to be positive. And I feel what Mark is doing here is actually talking just, well, it might not come back. And I think, honestly, because for certain groups of fans, they've always had Doctor Who. I'm thinking of the younger fans here, who didn't go through those years in the 80s. The concept of it not being on screen they're struggling with. I've certainly seen that online.
Yes,
And I
have I.
think and I think this is sort of a way to sort of say, guys, Doctor Who might not either come back ever, which I don't think it's going to happen if I'm being honest, but that's a possibility. We can't completely discount that. It would be foolish too. But even then, it's going to be off air for a while. And I think that needs to also be sort of out there just as much as the PR stuff, because I don't want certain fans to sort of think, oh, in a couple of months we're going to get an announcement and it's going to go into production. Like,
Yeah,
that's
those fans are out there and they're very, very vocal. So I suppose what we're saying is that depending on who you are, which generation you belong to, or how you're minded, you could either view Mark Gatiss here as somebody expressing great fellow feeling, or as a sage uncle sort of figure, Mike.
Yeah, I think the sage uncles are really. I think you hit the nail on the head on that one, because again, going back to the fact that he's working at the BBC, he's got his ear to the ground, he knows how these things work. And you know what? Maybe even though he's not done anything in Doctor Who for a long time, maybe there's always been a little bit of a kind of oh, Mark, would you like to write an episode? Or Mark, this is coming up. Or, you know, he probably still gets the odd fax, you know, wherever he gets. But maybe this time, like, nothing's happening at all. And he's thinking, you know what, if I'm hearing nothing at all, you know, we're in for a bit of a long ride here. You know, that's his you know, from his perspective, he's thinking, well, if I was a commission editor, if I was anybody working at the BBC, the first thing I'm thinking is, well, that's not coming back for a while. And he's just gently letting us know.
No, I think you're right. I think the fact that Doctor Who had a second act of 21 years is absolutely amazing. Amazing. And for it to come back possibly even more popular than it was in the first run. But I think maybe it's just time for a break, because all good things come to an end. You could dismiss this as a truism, as fortune cookie wisdom. I think it's actually very aligned with what Billie was saying on stage at the Excel. It's just that Gatiss probably had a little bit more time to think about it, and editors at the Radio Times who were willing to sort of to nip and tuck a few of his words here. I mean, he is a wordsmith, he is a writer, so it's going to come out slightly better and more formed, I suppose, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it is nicely written, and I think he quoted F. Scott Fitzgerald, I think, actually, for that quote. I think he said no one has a second act, but Doctor Who did have a second act, you know, and he's correct. You know, you try and think of other shows that did that, you know, Battlestar Galactica came back, but it was back for 5 years. It was a beginning, middle, and end, very much. I mean, I think
and it was completely well, and crucially, it was completely remade. It wasn't resumed, so it's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a kind of a spiritual sequel almost, wasn't it? Star Trek, when they do it, it's a new ship. It's like a new show. It's not even really a spin-off show. It's not quite. It's always a bit weird, isn't it? They're not quite spin-off shows. They're not quite
a new bunch of people pick up the baton there. I think it's similar to Doctor Who in the way that it moves things on. But obviously the actual series, the previous series, doesn't continue. A brand new series from a new season one commences. But the effect is largely the same. They go on to tell similar sorts of stories with similar groups of people with a lot of the same characteristics, just sort of chopped and changed. Chopped and changed. And
I suppose the Doctor Who equivalent would be like a series about a different Time Lord, maybe, you know, and then they would go around doing similar things.
That's right.
But yeah, it's had 21 years. That is pretty good. But I do think, as we go back to it, but has it stopped? But partly because it got meddled with. People stuck they took their foot off the gas, and then other people decided to throw their own agendas in it. You know,
I think that the only thing that Mark isn't saying, that Mike has pointed to there, Charlotte, is that Doctor Who actually didn't reach a natural conclusion this time. It didn't run out of steam. It was weaponized as part of a culture war, vandalized, turned inside out, and just went completely and utterly woke.
Well, it's sort of, as with a lot of these comments are about, oh, it had a second act, and he's even talking about the first run there. I think you can. There's a good argument there, and I've seen more fans do it because we're in this sort of reflective period right now of modern Who I think there's an argument that it run itself into this ground a lot quicker than Classic did.
Yeah.
Because of the decisions that happened in the modern run, because of how core tenets of the show got messed around, whether that's the Doctor themselves, the Doctor's backstory, regeneration, Gallifrey itself, the Time Lords, like all those things, which are such big parts of just the show's identity, and things that you can change a little bit, you can add to, and that's what Classic did. It evolved naturally. They added a bit more. They sort of expanded bits of the Doctor's backstory, but they never changed the Doctor wholesale. And it feels like in the modern run, for a while, even like we've said, it started to creep in with Capaldi. Sort of some of the things that were very much speeded up by the time when we had Whittaker and then Ncuti's run and a Tennant coming back. So yeah, I think he is sort of talking here without saying it, that there were sort of fatal choices that the modern run did, and it never really recovered. It just sort of added more damage on top of the stuff that has already gone wrong, in a sense.
Yeah, accumulated. He does go on to say, as a sort of coda, I feel very doomy, but it's true. It's fine. I think the fact it's come back so successfully means it will come back again. Again, this is something that Russell T Davies has been saying since he brought it back 20 years ago. So if you bring it back once and it's successful, then it's not a finite thing anchored to a particular time in our cultural history anymore. It is an IP, it is lore, it is popular culture. And again, I don't think any of us would argue with that. I don't view this as being very doomy. I think this is where Gatiss is probably becoming a little self-conscious as to how this could be received, because heaven knows a great many people who work in this industry that he's in just talk bullshit all the time, no matter what. I don't think he associates with Russell T Davies as frequently as he did. I can't remember the last time I saw them together. I'm sure they're still friendly enough. But the impression I get is that the two men couldn't be more different with the passage of all this time. I feel very doomy, but it's true. You'd never hear Russell T Davies say anything like that, even if he was feeling it. I think maybe it's just time for a proper break, because you want people to miss it and have fresh ideas, and probably someone to run it who grew up with David Tennant as the Doctor rather than Tom Baker, Charlotte. That's how Mark Gatiss signs off with this.
Yeah, and the thing is with Doctor Who, so many people in the industry, whether they're writers, camera operators, special effects people, even just producers and showrunners, would say, oh, I watched Doctor Who as a kid, or I caught some of the episodes and it inspired me this way. Doctor Who does seem to have this intrinsic quality that when the people watch it, if they're naturally creative, it sort of leads them to the creative industries, and then they sort of keep that love or that sort of thought of that's what inspired me. So if you can get some of those people when it's the right time, when the show's up for being run again, to go, no, actually, I want to do it. I think that's always going to happen a little bit just because of what Doctor Who is. And he's right. You will now have people like my generation that their first Doctor was Eccleston, then Tennant, then Smith. You will get people who have got those modern Doctors as their first touching point more than Classic.
Yeah, I think you're right. A proper break. He's serious about this, Mike. And I have to say that regardless of whether we're children of the Classic series or of the new series, I feel really quite strongly now that this does need to move on, that it shouldn't be creatives who are over 60, approaching 70 years of age, who are shepherding a show aimed at a family audience and particularly pointed towards children. What do you think? You're a dad too, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, fun enough, I was going to bring up my children in this bit. I was going to say, actually, because what I think with Gates was saying, which is right, I think he's going back to the fact that, yeah, the wilderness years was a really good hotbed of talent and people nurturing their talents as well. And he was one of them. And I said I enjoyed it. I actually thought some of the creativity was great. I mean, I actually had a camcorder and started to make my own Doctor Who episode. I realized it was a lot harder than it looked. You know, I filmed about 4 minutes of it, and unfortunately I don't have it anymore. It's a shame. I even had I got a thing about the TARDIS disappearing, which is why my friend just suddenly appears in the field. Like, press pause, like, get in there, press pause again. But it got us doing all these things. One of the things I would hope is, you know, because Mark Gatiss, I mean, if you know anything about his career, used to watch League of Gentlemen. I've seen all the stage shows. I watched them when they played art. I mean, he's obviously watched loads and loads of horror film. He's obviously very well educated man, by quoting F. Scott Fitzgerald. He loves Sherlock Holmes. You know, he's written his own show. Knows lots about history. He's got a big smorgasbord worth of stuff that he knows. Which inspires him with his Doctor Who. And I think about my own kids, right? They've got like a big wide range, partly because, you know, I show them Doctor Who, Star Trek. I love my outside music. I love showing them really unusual videos and music and stuff like that. And I've got my daughter into Sherlock Holmes. I've got my son into doing animation. So they've got a bit of a smorgasbord of what they like as well, on top of their own stuff. But what I would hope is not going to ever happen is what I think it's Jason K. Pargin. He's a podcaster, and he explained why The Simpsons started to go downhill. And he says because people are just, their influence is The Simpsons. And I would hate it if the people that came in the future, their only influence was Doctor Who, because then you'd end up with this kind of like kind of echo chamber. What you want is them with all these other experiences. You want the kind of
rather than Doctor Who feeding off itself and funneling back into itself.
You want to have the Stanley Kubricks watching that and thinking, right, that's going to influence me to do 2001. You want the brain of Morbius based on Frankenstein, but particularly the Frankenstein movies rather than even the book. You know, that's what you want. You want them to have a big world of knowledge, not just to come in and just feed off Doctor Who, because that would probably be quite terrible.
I think that's an excellent point, Charlotte. So it's certainly true that the same ideas, the same concepts have sort of recurred, just as you were saying. There's been an attempt since Chris Chibnall took it over to kind of do the things that had worked before.
Well, I think they had to do that because it just wasn't connecting with audiences. It felt a bit like a handbrake turn when suddenly you had so much nostalgia in Jodie's second series. Yeah, no, I agree with Mike. I think whoever takes this on, whenever there has been a break, they need to sort of be outside the bubble. I've said that, and I think a lot of fans are coming round to that idea now, because if you're part of the same circle, like 21 years, it's been sort of the same friendship group, and Gators is definitely part of that, being the showrunners, then it does sort of get very samey. It gets echo chamber-like. Whereas if you've got somebody who's not got that sort of link when it comes to, nostalgia, this character, who's completely different sort of background, then their ideas can inspire new life. Like you said with Mike was saying about Hinchcliffe era, his inspirations were clearly gothic. It was clearly the likes of Frankenstein, of Hammer, of those sort of things.
Yeah, that kind of Edgar Allan Poe kind of thing. Yeah, wasn't there H.P. Lovecraft? Yeah, those sort of influences. Yeah.
So when he came in, the show had a completely different feel. It really felt like we are going darker. We are exploring slightly more sort of adult than what Doctor Who was seen as sort of what it could do before that. And of course you had Tom, who was this very eccentric sort of doctor, so he suited that. But that only happened, I feel like, because Hinchcliffe had those other inspirations that clearly fed back in. So yeah, I think as much as Doctor Who does inspire, like I said before, I agree with Mike, it needs to be somebody who's got lots of inspirations, who comes in hopefully after this break. And I think that's sort of what Gatiss is saying here a little bit, with this idea of a proper break, people have to miss it. I think he's sort of saying it needs that new blood. It needs somebody to come in from the outside, sort of, and be that new sort of creative push, which the show has sort of been not having for a while, I feel like.
I've noticed, looking back through the various quotes over the last couple of years, Mark Gatiss, he's enough on the outside now that he can speak fairly candidly, always respectfully, but quite candidly. He was asked about Doctor Who well over a year ago in June 2025, again by the Radio Times. I don't think anyone knows what is going on with Doctor Who at the moment, he answered to a very similar question. All I know is it's all about the Disney deal. That's more than anybody else had said at the time. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
So clearly he was informed, but was content, secure enough to say what he could, to word it in a no-nonsense way. And this didn't cause any problems that I'm aware of. I mean, not that I've heard of. Maybe it did privately. I don't know. But I think fans really appreciate this kind of honesty.
Yeah.
Some have reacted badly to his tone. But I think if we look back and see the consistency of the things that he said and the way in which they're offered, there's no sort of na about any of this. I think that Gatiss views this as a kindness, actually, Mike.
Yeah. I think actually when you read that, it is all I know, it's about the Disney deal. He knew that the deal finished. That was it. They got the 2 series, it was gone. That's not actually lying. That's not being, it's not hiding anything. He's not being cryptic. And I don't think anyone knows what's going on with Doctor Who at the moment. It really is as simple as that. They've cut their deal, end of. And I think it's a nice, honest comment. Yeah. It makes me like him even more.
And again, there's a pretty big player who's taken his ball and gone home just at a time where people sort of would have, largely speaking, most people wanted to hear more about Doctor Who being out of production, about Doctor Who being out to tender, all of these things which hit us one morning a couple of months ago that a lot of people really didn't see coming. And there's the likes of Billie Piper and now Mark Gatiss left to speak, left to answer for people who won't speak, who've probably got no intention of ever speaking again. Obviously, all of this is to be continued. I'm sure that the anxiety, the confusion surrounding it all will also continue, Charlotte. That's never really going to stop. Would it help if Russell himself spoke to? The truth of the matter is it probably wouldn't. But it would have been nice if while he was speaking, we had something that was a little bit more honest, more human, less gaslighting, less spite, I think. But you can't force people to grow up. Some people, as they get older, they seem to get more and more infantile. I think we're very fortunate to have somebody like Mark Gatiss in our corner and happy to speak. If he speaks, I listen, even if it's something that I don't wish to hear. And my own take on this, Charlotte, is that I'd be absolutely and totally on the exact page as Mark Gatiss right now, if not for one thing. If we hadn't had that statement from Bob Fussell at BBC Studios about a month ago, he seems very determined to go for that tender, that there will be a tender and that they are going to get it. Had it not been that statement from somebody so high up at somewhere like BBC Studios, I'd be completely in agreement with Mark Gatiss.
Yeah, and Gatiss probably would have seen that statement because, like we've said, he works for the BBC, he's worked for them, and he's just part of the television industry at this point. So if the head of BBC Studios basically says, yeah, we're going to go for it, like full guns blazing, we're going to do it, he would know about that. But I think, like I said, my feeling is, I think he's just talking a bit more generally here, that we have to face reality. There's no point as fans here sort of trying to constantly look at just the positive side of it. Like, this is a very murky situation we're in right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We know a tender is going to go out, and we don't even know, though, when it's going to go out, because I think people are forgetting in that statement, the BBC didn't give us a month, didn't say in 2 months' time. They went in due course, which could mean anything. That's on purpose being vague, or sort of, so you don't have to answer to a deadline. So I think Mark is just sort of trying to make it a bit more balanced now, even though we had that statement from studios that we need to just be prepared for this is going to take time. Even if somebody bids for it, it's not a quick process to get a show back on the ground after it's been out of production the way it has now been out of production. And the other thing is, as a fan, I think the last thing he would want to do is to sort of put salt in the wound here. I think he's sort of, just like I said, being honest and sort of saying, it's not going to be easy, folks, right now. Like, we're not in a nice time at all. And we just sort of have to wait and see what happens. But he's sort of saying it in a bit more detail because, like we said, he's a very learned guy and he's a writer himself.
Mark Gatiss stars in season 2 of Bookish. That's screening from the 26th of August on You and Alibi. Check your service provider. Check your package in the nicest possible way, Mike, to see if it contains that channel. So Virgin, Sky, Fire Stick, however and wherever you get your drama, go and get some Bookish in your life. And yeah, thank you to Mark Gatiss for being an all-round good egg, being painfully honest and agreeing with us. It's never a bad thing. This one. There's the gurgling and the rumbling, calling time on another conversation. But there's more on the way soon enough. Look out for that, wherever it was you found this. Maybe our dedicated home feed, that's type40.podbean.com. We're across all major podcatchers, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Apple, all those places and lots more. See us as well as hear us on our YouTube and Rumble channels with enhanced video editions of every show. And there's exclusive extra videos and live streams too. Not forgetting our mothership, the Fandom Podcast Network's master feed. Please consider a trip sideways in time there for more quality, practically daily shows from the FPN. Make contact through our social medias. Have your say on all of this and that. Instagram and X at Type40 Doctor Who. Email us, type40doctorwho@outlook.com. And there's still the Type40 Facebook group too. Of course there is thousands of other Doctor Who fans from all over the world, maybe a few other worlds too. Rants and raves, discussions and debates, issues of the moment or the ongoing storms. It's all on the wall there at the Type40 Facebook group. Get stuck in with fellow fans and companions. I think we sorted all that out between us. I think we made some sense of it. It's worthy of a fist bump or whatever Chris and Matt are doing in this picture. Yeah, did we make some sense of it? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it was right to jump on this, wasn't it? It's the nearest thing we've had in news for about 6 weeks there, Charlotte.
Yeah, it's sort of, we've had lots of silence. And when it's people, like you said, that are very connected in different ways, you sort of take a lot more notice.
I'm not sure when the convention circuit ever really shuts down. We'll probably hear from more people. I'm very aware, Mike, that as it goes on, that bit by bit, it'll work its way out, like the rings inside of a tree trunk. Anybody who's been associated with Doctor Who over the last 20 years will be asked versions of these questions, this set of, say, 4 or 5 questions about the present predicament the show finds itself in. They will get round to asking absolutely everybody. And I don't want to sort of jump on literally every time something like this happens, but there are key people. And I believe that Billie Piper is absolutely one of them. She would have been even without the end of the reality war, you know?
Yeah, I think, I'm hoping that same thing will happen. And maybe, hopefully, these other people think, well, actually, maybe it's not bad dropping, in my opinion, a few morsels. I mean, look at all the attention Billy's got. I mean, regardless of what you might think, it's great for her career. You know, she's I mean, we respect her for what she said. She's got her back in the news. Her name is like being, you know, probably checked 1,000 million times all over Facebook and all the, you know, social media. So actually, if it's good for her, hopefully other people think, well, actually, yeah, I'll give my opinion. I'll drop in a little hint here and there. Realize it's, you know, it's what's good for the goose and all that. So yeah, and we'll be back here on Type 40 hopefully, and we'll pull that apart as well, like starving people on a pulled pork pig, roasted succulent.
She said so little in some respects, Charlotte. I mean, she spoke for about 30 seconds, all in all. But it was dense. It was dense with information, wasn't it? I think it was right that we do this. Do you feel guilty at all?
Well, no, because it was literally the last face, as Mike said, we saw on screen, gave a little bit more information. And I think it's different if it's like somebody who's not been in the show for 10 years and they say, oh, well, I think this. It's still nice to hear it, but they've not got that connection. Whereas Billie is literally the last actor, if you think about it, that contributed to the show.
Sorry, Billie, you're in the chair for a good while yet, whether you like it or not. Mike, thank you for coming on, mate. It's been great to catch up with you.
So it was a pleasure. I really appreciate you asking me on. I really do. I love it. I told you I have to bottle this all up. So when I come on, I'm like a shaken up bottle of Diet Coke, and you guys are like the Mentos. You chuck it in, and that's what Type 40 is for me. It's that explosion.
Oh, keep it out of the grooves in between the keys on your keyboard, though, for heaven's sake. That thing will be no good to anybody, no good to man or beast after something like that. It's great to catch up with you, mate. Thank you.
No, it's
Charlotte,
always a pleasure, mate.
I felt like I activated the bat signal here when I said we should talk about this, but you've been as good a sport as ever. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I can sort of be the sort of calmer influence for Mike to be sort of like the kid when you give them too many sweets. And you sort of say, go.
And just like any excitable kid, you know, if you put on a cartoon or something, Mike, usually calms them down a little. What's your cartoon of choice? Yogi Bear, Top Cat? Which one would you go for?
Oh, I got two in particular. Pink Panther. I love Pink Panther.
Yes.
In fact, actually, one of my animation projects is based on Pink Panther, which I shall let you know more about. Another one I love is the Hair Bear Bunch.
I nearly name-checked the Hair Bear Bunch. That was a big favourite of mine in the late 70s.
That used to be my nickname at school, Hair Bear, because I used to have a big afro.
Of course it was. Go and Google that now, Charlotte. Hair Bear Bunch.
And think of me. Okay, think of me.
I will.
I think that's an ultimate. That's a Type 40 cliffhanger, all of our own. Maybe not quite as good as the reality wars, but it's the best that we're going to get. We'll see you. We'll be back soon with another Type 40 Doctor Who podcast where we always have the time if you have the space. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.